right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Dreamforce. And thank you for being here at 8:30. I know it's daylight savings time, but still, thank you for being here at 8:30, one of the first sessions at this year's Dreamforce. We have an exciting presentation and demos planned for you. I'm Kamyar. I'm the product manager for Lightning Data Service and the User Interface API. And we have a couple of the engineers from our team here with us to talk about our product and also do some demos, Thomas and Sahil. So today we're going to talk a little bit about Lightning Platform, and then also go into the details of what Lightning Data Service is and how it helps you, and then do some demos, talk about roadmap, all that fun stuff. But before we go forward, you guys better start getting used to this slide. You're going to see it like a million times. Some of you, I've already got it burnt into your retinas. Yeah. So we are going to talk about roadmap stuff. I think at Dreamforce, we like to tell you about what's coming over the next year or so you guys can plan. It's exciting for us to share our plans with you, but please, when you make your purchasing decisions, when you make your decisions around what to use around the software, only consider the things that are publicly available in GA right now. And we'll highlight those, but still it's good to tell you about our plans and what's coming down the road. So before we talk about Lightning Platform, how many here are admins? Fabulous. And how many are developers? Cool. And then just so that I know, how many here are with partners versus customers? Partners, raise your hand. Fabulous. So we have a nice mix of admins, developers, partners, customers. Again, really appreciate you guys being here at Dreamforce and coming here to talk to us about, or listen to us talk about Lightning Platform. So Lightning Platform, a lot of you are familiar with it. You're here because you use it. It is, when we talk about Lightning, we talk about the experience, right? What the users see across all their different services, be it desktop, mobile, tablet, watches, the next generation of user interfaces. It's all tied together for us using the framework that we're going to talk about a little bit today. And then there's also the ecosystem. A lot of you are partners and customers. You're familiar with App Exchange. You know the value of being able to build on top of platform, being able to build apps that you can then make available on App Exchange or add it to your orgs, customize your orgs for your business processes. And that's really what brings it all together as Lightning so that we build a really rich and fun and complete experience for all of our users. But how do we make this a reality, right? So we talked about the framework is really what ties all of this together. So Lightning is built on top of our existing, the most trusted database in the cloud, which is Salesforce. Many of you have already built on top of it. You're familiar with it. And Lightning is the stack that basically allows you to do things a lot easier and in a more uniform way for your users. We want to focus a little bit here today on low-code development, but we'll also talk to you about advanced development. So it's a nice mix. But just recently, Forrester Research named Salesforce's development platform as one of the leaders when it comes to low-code development. And what makes that possible is this stack. And when you consider the base components, which are the individual building blocks in Lightning that developers can use to then either build their custom components. If you're an external developer, you can use base components to really easily build custom components. And then we also have the experience components, which are the ones that we also build at Salesforce using the same technology comprised of the building blocks, which are the smaller components, to give you an out-of-the-box experience for your users. And if you've used App Builder, how many people have used App Builder here? Great. So if you've used App Builder, when you modify a page to try to add a component to it, a Lightning component to it, those are the experience components, right, and the custom components. So this is the stack that allows all of our developers internal and external, to use the same technology to build in Lightning. So what about Lightning Data Service makes this the low-code option, and it's great to use for low-code development? Well, Lightning Data Service is basically the API layer for all of our developers to build Lightning components. And when we say the API layer, just recently, as I mentioned earlier, I'm also the product manager for the user interface API. And just recently, we made all of our user interface API public. And you can go to developer.salesforce.com. It's all documented there. You can see all of these endpoints that we have, that we've worked on over the last 3-5 years to build the functionality, build the presentation layer logic, add business logic to our platform in Lightning to make it easier for developers to build UI. And those are basically the user interface API. And what I want you to think about, Lightning Service is an extension of these public REST API. And why do I say that? Well, it's because when you're building UI and you're in an app, there are certain things that we know you're going to want to do, like serializing, like caching. And our philosophy here is, if everybody needs to do it, then why make everybody do it? We should do it once, and then everybody can take advantage of it. And that's what we've done with Lightning Data Service, is we've taken our public API, and we made it a lot easier to use if you're building in Lightning. But it's all documented, it has the same shape, and that way you can go in and also peek ahead to see what's coming. So a lot of you raised your hands when I asked about customers, developers. And so how many here have already built Lightning components? Fabulous. So you can relate to this slide, because if you've built Lightning components, you have probably used Apex controllers to build those components. And so when we talk about Lightning Data Service and the value that it provides, on top of how you're already used to building Lightning components, is where we have to show you where we save you time. So where we save you time is if you have multiple components that you're writing, each of those components today, if you're not using Lightning Data Service, has to actually make its own API calls through Apex controller to retrieve data and metadata. Right? You have to learn SOQL, you have to do all these things just to build a Lightning component. And then if you install an app, or if you install 2 apps in your org, and you add them to the same page, all of those components, even though they might be working with the same record, are now making API calls. And that basically means you're driving extra traffic through your app, which means that your users are sitting there waiting for stuff to go back and forth between the client and the server. And then it also means that when one component makes a change to the record, it has to go all the way to the server before the other component knows that something changed. So that makes for some UI inconsistencies that isn't exactly the greatest thing for end users. So what do we do with Lightning Data Service? Well, as I mentioned earlier, we already have API that talk to Salesforce in the cloud. And with the data service, what we're able to do is take that API and, as part of the serialization process, also do some caching. And what that caching allows us to do is allow components that are on the same page that can't really talk to each other, because I'm sure many of you here, as many people as raised their hands, are familiar with Locker service. One of the awesome things about Lightning is that we can put applications, components from different sources on the same page without compromising security, by allowing one component to use the DOM to access stuff from another component. Very bad. But with Lightning Data Service, we have a controlled way, an API way, for components to exchange data. And so that way, even though the components may be from different sources, they actually look like they're all built by the same person, because it makes for that kind of experience. And it also reduces the amount of back and forth with the server, so it's much better for the end users. So in Winter 18, you should all be already on Winter 18, but if you haven't already, you can notice force record data is the component that is Lightning Data Service. And these are the advantages of it. So as I mentioned earlier, and what you'll see in a little bit when we do the demos, is that with Lightning Data Service, you no longer need to have an Apex controller if all you're doing is CRUD operations on an individual record. And that should save you a ton of time. But what it also does is, just like whenever you build on Salesforce platform, we handle things like authentication for you. So whereas if you were using the public API directly, you'd have to worry about auth and all that other stuff. But when you're in the Lightning stack, you just build your component. We figure out who the users are. We do FLS. We do record sharing. We do all that complex handling of who has access to what. And then that way you don't need to. So that's a huge advantage there, and things that you don't have to do. And the other thing that we're able to do with Lightning Platform and Lightning Data Service right now is when you build a Lightning component, then you're not subjected right now to our API limits. So a lot of you, I know, are customers and developers that have been using Salesforce for a long time. You're familiar with our public API limits that each org gets. But when you build on top of Lightning, that's another advantage where you're not subjected to that. And as I was mentioning earlier, because we cache information for you in our clients, that just makes your components snappier, right? When a user is using them, boom, the data just gets updated. If you have multiple components, they all get updated across those. And the consistency, the performance is really nice. And you'll see that when we cut over to our demo. And let me change this out. And Sahil is going to come and show you quickly our demo for an easy Lightning component that we built.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sahil, and I am a lead engineer in Lightning Data Service team. What I'm going to show you is how amazing your Lightning data components can be when you use Lightning Data Service. This is actually going to change your life, like if you start using Lightning Data Service component directly without using Apex. So let's take a look. OK. So what we have here is a custom record home. We have a highlights component on the top, a detailed panel on the left, and a related list on the right. This is the default components you get like when you create a custom Lightning record home. So for this Gmail usability study custom object, what we have done here is we need some test users. And to do that, either I can go to the user object and create some new users and link it to the Gmail usability study. But to make it more simple, what we have done here is we have created this quick action called create test user. What this quick action does is it is backed by it's backed by a form, which is created in the Lightning components. What this form has is a first name, last name, nickname, user email, and password. The cool thing about this form is this is all client-side code, and we have added some auto generation on the client side and an email validation. We don't have to build an admin validations because that will get applied everywhere. This is to make very specific to this use case that you want to have a quick form where you want to just type in and create users.
I may interrupt for just a second. So one of the things that our customers ask a lot of us is that it's very useful to them to be able to write code that executes in the client so that they can have a more robust and synchronous interaction with the end user. Again, if you've built Lightning components that use Apex controllers, a lot of times you have to do a lot more to make that happen. If you have data validation, it needs to, there's some challenges there that you have to overcome, which Sahil will show you. But what he's going to show you with this custom object that we built, which is around a basic email usability study, right? It's just we're going in, we're saying, hey, we're going to do an email usability study. We're going to send out some surveys, see what people think about Gmail. And this is a way for them to go in and quickly add users to this study so that they can keep track of them and send them surveys and stuff. So there's some information that you need to capture for these users, but you also want to make sure that as you're capturing this information, you're doing things the way you want. So as Sahil was saying, you want to have an anonymous nickname, for example. We'll show you how you're going to do that. And then we also want to make sure that you actually have an email address, because you can't really do an email study if you can't send anybody an email. So that's what this form is a quick way for the user to be able to build a component that runs in the client and validates in the client. Sorry, Sahil.
Thanks, Cameron. OK, so what we have here is the first name. And let's put Mark here. I know he's going to be busy. And if you pay attention, this nickname is auto-generated. For this auto-generation, we did not go to server side and have to write an Apex controller to create it. This is all happening on client side. And later, I'll show you on the code how it works. And then you have a last name. And I'm going to create an email. And I'm using his Salesforce email. And I'm going to give him a password. Wow. OK, so now you can see we have a Gmail validation applied on the email that you cannot use any other email here. So I'm going to go ahead and correct it. And I'm going to save the user. And look at that. Now we have a nice toast showing us that the user has been created. And you can see Mark Baniam shows up here. So let's go through the code, how this actually works. OK. So we are here at the create user component. So this is the component which is behind the quick action. As you can see, this is a Lightning component. And it has the HTML markup to create the form. You can see there's a first name, last name, nickname, email, password, and cancel and save button. The cool thing about this component is it also has force record data. This is the Lightning Data Service component responsible for creating and saving the user information in Salesforce. Other thing happening on this form is the auto generation of the nickname, which you can see we have a controller binding here on the key down. So as soon as you fill in the first name, it goes and creates a custom nickname and fill the information in. And we also have a save handler attached to the save button. Let's look at the controller, how it looks like. OK, so this is how the nickname is generated. As soon as you fill in the first name, we capture this information, and using the date, we are creating this anonymous nickname and fill into the form. And in the save, what we do here is we capture all the user inputs, and then we validate the password in the email. I'm going to dig in and show you how the validation is done when we go to the helper methods. And then after the validation is performed, if everything is fine, we go ahead and call the save method on the helper. So let's go look at how the validation is done. So we have a validation around password. It has to have some minimum number of characters and a password length and some custom character. And we also have the validation around the email, in which what we are checking is if it's a Gmail address or not. If you're going to put any other email address, it's going to complain and give you an error on the form that it is not something you can use here. After the validation is done, we capture all the information, convert it into a record representation. As you can see, we are creating a JSON object here, and then we set it on the form data, the force record data component. So once you put this record representation on the force record, and when we call the save record, it automatically sends this information to the Salesforce APIs, save the record, and bring back the response. If we have any error, we get the state as an error state. If it's successful, we get a success state. And once we have a successful response back, we close the quick action model, which we were seeing, and we show you the nice toast, and then we refresh the view so that the latest data is reflected on the page. Now, the cool thing, if you look at it here, we have not used any Apex code. There is no Apex controller tied in. It's all happening within the Lightning. So the good part is you don't have to learn now 3 technologies to do a very simple job. You just have to stay in Lightning and just write the Lightning code. It's as simple as that. So with that, we have some more cool demos to show, and I'm going to bring Thomas in.
Hi. Thanks, Sahil.
Thanks, Sahil. So as Thomas is setting up, I want to give you the background a little bit on this app. So how many here, we should have a healthy number, are familiar with JavaScript buttons and use them? Yes. So as many of you know, and maybe probably not to your liking, we do not let JavaScript buttons execute in Lightning. And there's a whole big post, if you go look for it, that there's actually a blog series that I wrote on why, along with some of our engineers. And really what it boils down to is for security reasons, and because Lightning has the paradigm where you can have multiple components from different sources on the same page, we just couldn't allow JavaScript to run because of the damage that it can do. So when we built this demo, and we'll make this code available in our Trailhead module, so that you can go, if you need to go look at it, it'll be posted. And originally when we did this, we had to write an Apex controller and do it that way, because Lightning Data Service wasn't public yet. So if you go look at it probably right now, you'll see the old version. But we'll be updating that now with Lightning Data Service. And the reason this is so important is because one of the biggest use cases for customers who are using JavaScript buttons is, well, aside from URL hacks, is that they like to be able to write client-side code that does this interaction with the users. And this is what makes that easy, right? In a secure way, in a component that you can share and people can add to their various pages without really losing sleep at night because you got JavaScript going on. But thanks for waiting, Thomas. Go ahead.
No problem. Thank you. It's amazing to see everybody here on the first morning of Dreamforce. So Sahil just showed us a great example of a quick action that uses Lightning, uses no Apex, and does creation of a record. And it's pretty simple. The code that you did see was JavaScript, all on the client side. I'm going to show you something a little bit different. I'm going to show you an app that's a real estate application. It's built around the notion of taking a look at properties for sale and doing property comparisons. So let's dive in. I'm going to load up a property here. And we can see that it's in the heart of Harvard Square. It's 49 Brattle Street. And then this is the detail panel that you're all used to. Over on the right side here, I've got some cards that I've created. And these cards show associated information. So this card that I'm mousing over here shows the broker information for this property. So Victor here is the real estate broker for 49 Brattle Street. And then below this card, I've got two other cards that are showing similar properties by price and similar properties by bedrooms. And so if I come over and edit my detail panel, what I'm going to show you here is how I can get some interactivity going between these cards. So if I come over here and I edit the price, I'm going to drop the price here.
Interest rates are going up. How's the prices go down?
Yeah, I know prices are always supposed to go up, but they sometimes don't. And
it's not just about Lightning Data Service. We teach you finance here too. Yeah.
So when I did that, now my similar properties by price have changed here, right? I'm now viewing properties that are in the price range that are comparable to 49 Brattle Street. And similarly, if I come over here and I change the number of bedrooms, maybe I got that wrong, maybe it's actually 4 bedrooms, then you'll see there was an update, and down here now I'm seeing 4-bedroom properties in my similar properties by bedrooms card. So at the same time, if I go and change information here completely unrelated to my broker, maybe I need to make this street, and maybe I want to jazz up the name a little bit. So now you just saw over here the property name change on my broker card. And the way this is working is all these cards are they're using force record data, and they're using a single cache of records to notify when a record is changing. So these are using those notifications, those callbacks and events that are so useful in Lightning, to tell other components when something of interest is happening. And let me dive into the code and show you a little bit about how this works. Oops. Okay. Okay, so in my broker card, I've got the now familiar, hopefully, force record data. And this is loading the record that's in the context of this Flexi page, which is the property. And once I get that, I can look at the field I'm interested in for my broker card. I can get the property from it, and I can use that to load the broker record. And this is what you were seeing shown off on the right side in the broker information. So I use that to load my record for the broker, and then over in the card, and that's going to embed a broker detail. So I forgot to show you that, but a little further down here, we're showing a broker details component. And in my broker details component, we've got something interesting here. We've got a Lightning record view form and a Lightning layout item, which contains a Lightning output field. And this is referencing the fields that you see actually displayed there. Now, what's interesting here is I didn't go to Apex and run any SOCL to load any data. All I did was say, these are the fields I want to show. And force record data underneath all of this is taking care of that for me. So another thing you'll notice, if I switch back here to the UI for a second, is things are formatted. My phone numbers, they're formatted. They're linkable. My email address looks like an email address. And I didn't do anything. I didn't style this. I didn't do anything unusual or even any extra effort. So this is doing the work underneath all this to figure out what are the types of these things and how should I display them. And this is all built on top of the information coming out of Lightning Data Service. So then if I show you what's going on in the similar properties area, where's my component? Yeah, here's my component. Looking at it. So force record data is a little different in this context. So when you saw the similar properties update, this is happening using a little bit of Apex. And I'll show you that in a second. It's using that because I've got a complex query going on. And I bring this up because I don't want you to leave here thinking that you never need to know Apex again. There's still cases where you're going to need to use Apex. And when you're doing something like a complex query like this, where you have a where condition and you're looking to make sure the number of beds is the same as your search criteria, or you're looking to make sure that your price range is still what you need, then Apex is still going to have a role to play. However, what this is really buying me is this is buying me the ability to know when I need to invoke this controller, when I need to go run my Apex. So I'm registering on the force record data for the record ID in the context of the Flexi page. And then in my record updated handler, this is telling me when I need to do something, and I'm running my do search. And in my do search, this is where I'm collecting the information I need, and I am setting everything up to go back to the server and run my Apex and refresh my components. This is my get similar properties controller method, and that's what you saw over here a second ago in my, got my tabs out of order, in my Apex. So again, to jump back to the display here, you're seeing that when I update a price or something relevant and I save it, that's updating both these components. It's using eventing in here. And this is very helpful because it's keeping me from trying to guess when to run my components. Sometimes when every component has its own controller, it is going to get, you could get into conditions where you have race conditions, one component's loading data, another component's loading the same data, another third component's loading the same data. That's a lot of trips, and they're not sharing a cache. And with Lightning Data Services, you've got one record, they're all sharing it, they all know when it changed, they don't have any consistency issues in the UI. And so that makes things really nice. And then the other thing you're seeing here is that with this broker card, I wrote very little code. This is kind of your low code example for the demos. We showed some JavaScript, we showed some Apex, but this is a really low code example. I did very little here except create some tags and said I want to display these fields. And Lightning Data Services and the components stack on top of it, which you're going to learn more about probably while you're here at Dreamforce, they're taking care of all that for me. They're taking care of retrieving the data, caching it, formatting it when I display it, and all that's just sort of happening magically for me. So this is what I wanted to show, and I will hand it back to Kamyar.
All right, thank you, Thomas.
Thank you.
All right, so let's go back to the presentation. All right, thank you for those demos. And just to recap, so a lot of you who have been using Visualforce are familiar with the standard controller. You can think of Lightning Service as something that's very similar to standard controller, right? Because you can say, I'm working with this object, or I'm working with this record, and then all of a sudden you get a lot of add-on stuff that come with it when it comes to the data, the metadata, et cetera. But to highlight again why this is such a neat addition to the stack, remember, if you don't need to, you don't have to write Apex. I think Thomas already kept us honest by saying we're not saying you never have to use Apex again. I mean, obviously, the caching is for the records that one user is looking at. But when you're going back and finding similar properties, we're not loading the entire database in the client, right? So you have to go back and fetch the new records that fit the new criteria. But the power is really around the eventing, right? How cool is it to have a notification system for all the components where when one changes something, even though it might be from a third-party author, everybody finds out about it, and then they can go off and do whatever they need to do without having to have visibility into each other's code. And like I said, that's really, really powerful. The other cool thing is, you saw in the code, we can put fields on there, like name, address, et cetera. When we use Lightning Data Service, we apply things like field level security and record sharing. So when you build your component and a user looks at it who doesn't have access to that record either because of CRUD or doesn't have access to a particular field because of FLS, we just automatically suppress that for you so that you don't have to write all this extra code in every single component that you build that does all those validations just to make sure your component works for everybody. So we have a few minutes left. I want to make sure we put enough time for Q&A. So one thing I mentioned is you can think of Lightning Data Service as an extension of our user interface API. They're public now with Winter 18. They're GA. You can go look at all the different endpoints to see the work that we've done. But these are some of the things that we intend to also expose in Lightning Data Service, such as giving you direct access to object metadata in case you want to write a component that wants to inspect that information. We're going to provide pick list values and dependent lookups and all the things you see up here, as well as lists so that you can work with multiple records. But before we go to Q&A, there's several sessions that I like to call out for you to go check out. So we talked about user interface API a lot. We'll be presenting a session similar to this just for the API on Wednesday at 2 to 2:40 in Moscone West, the room next door. We also have another session that's the developer session where Sahil and another engineer will go deeper into code around Lightning Data Service and the dev zone. And then we have another dev zone planned for user interface API. And don't forget to check out our developer keynote with Srini, which is happening tomorrow afternoon. Definitely check that out because it kind of gives you the overview of all of the developer features that we've been working on across Lightning and Salesforce. And then also check out the Lightning roadmap for developers. So there, you can check out our SVP of product, Ryan Ellis, later on today. And he'll be presenting on the roadmap for the base components that we were talking about earlier in terms of the building blocks, as well as the entire ecosystem, the entire framework of Lightning. And he'll go into further detail about the roadmap for the stack. Okay, so if you have questions, feel free to come up to the mic or raise your hand. I can repeat it. But thank you so much, everybody, for coming and joining us. And hopefully you guys got good information out of this session. Question?
Yeah. I was wondering about the access control with the CRUD. Let's say we built our own currency field just to display in a very unique way. Is there a way that we can get access to whether or not the user had access to that field at that given time? Or is that exclusively for your built-in base components?
No, we honor custom. So you have a custom field that you've built, and either it's part of a custom object or you've added it to a standard object, and you've set your specific read-write flags on it.
I'm actually talking about like our own Lightning component to display it in a very unique way. Do we have access to the same access control information that the standard, that your base components have?
I see what you're saying. So you can style your component in your own way. You can go deeper and write more code instead of the low-code options and still access Lightning Data Service just to get the data, and then apply your own formatting to it instead of using our out-of-the-box. Is that what your question is? Yeah, you can do that.
Well, yeah, but do we still have access to whether or not that the field is disabled or the field is read-only?
Yes, all that information will be applied.
Okay. He's asking, do you have the information itself?
It's like field information.
So you have to wait for object. So you have the use case for the object metadata, where you want to be able to examine the object metadata for like a particular field on an object, and that's coming. That's on our roadmap.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Can it be used with communities?
In our winter GA release, no, but Safe Harbor in spring, it's very likely that it'll be supported with communities as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Could you explain how deduplication works with the framework?
The deduplication?
Yes.
So Lightning Data Service already honors the dedupe rules that an admin sets up or a third party sets up for their object, and we just basically, if it's duplicate, you'll essentially run into the same issues.
And it visually gets back an error message or so.
Sorry, repeat that?
How is it visually handled in the page?
Good question. So if, for example, you build a component and then somebody goes and puts a duplicate data in there, and it's your custom component, how do we, do you want to answer it? You're mic'd.
Okay, so yeah, for duplicate information, let's say when you save a record, and at that time the dedupe rules runs through, and if you get like a duplicate error there, so it will be returned as the state as an error state. And then the response, you can see it will give you the record IDs.
Okay.
And you can use for the record data there to extract the information which duplicate records are there.
Okay, clear, yeah. Cool.
Hi. In your first demo where you had the email user, where you had the button, click the button to add a new test user, whatever that was, that launched the component, and I want to make sure I understand the complete rationale for that. You could have put on that button simply a URL for, action equals URL for, and go to a new form to create that user. But that would be server-side validation instead of client-side validation? Is that the rationale there?
Well, the new takes the detail panel, so it will show you all the fields. And yes, it does the server-side validation also, including the dedupes and other admin-defined validations, like field validation is another things which admin can define. Like the same thing which we did on the client side, admin can do it on the server side. But to make it like a very quick form to capture the information, and so that's why like we created this quick action. It's called a quick action because we want to capture something really quick, and we want to apply these validation on the client side so that we can avoid the server-side call and get the validation and errors back.
Okay, and once you've got that in the component, then you just use the Lightning Data Service to go to the server. You still never have to go to the Apex.
Lightning Data Service will take care of taking the data to the server side, and if there are any server-side validations defined, it will do the validation there also. But this is just a check on the client side.
Okay. We're out of time, but we'll hang out here. Actually, we'll come out there. If you guys want to come back and ask us your questions, we'll hang out and answer your questions. Sorry about that, everybody.